This is some of the vintage knives that I have. Some are certainly older than others, and I know the history on some of them, but somebody gave me this old, might have been called the cowboy knife. It's marked Imperial, Providence, Rhode Island, and obviously it's been ground down a lot. There's nothing fancy about it, but makes a good yard knife, just a beater knife, something that you got a piece of steel that you can sharpen, uh, and I suspect that it's fairly old, 50 or 60 at least. I'm not sure about that, but I've got a couple of these knives. These are Westerns. This one's marked with the Boy Scout emblem, little uh, little hunter, little perhaps a trout knife like. I don't know what they Western called them. This one has stacked leather handles, and aluminum butt cap, and it had a brass finger guard. It was really, really loose. And so I decided to put some pieces of flat copper in next to the brass to tighten everything up. And I just shoved it in there and kind of filed it down. And that's a good knife. It's been used a lot, but it's nice to have a knife like that. I have one very similar to it, also by Western. Doesn't have the Boy Scout marking on it, but it has bone handles, and got a little bit bigger handle, just a little bit bigger. I like the bone, and I expect these things are easily 50, 60 years old. If any of these knives, if you know something about them, I don't know the history on some of these, feel free to comment. I'd be interested in knowing. I enjoy those designs. I like seeing those. This I mentioned in a previous video, but this is an old camp knife. This is Japanese. This has got to be dating from probably the 1950s. Made in Japan, nothing special, probably just a big knockoff of Swiss Army knives and stuff. But how many knives do you see that have a spoon built in and a fork? It's a lot of fun. Big pair of scissors. This was found in an old camp when I was very young, when I was a kid. There's a blade that I have no idea for sure what it was. It broke off right in here. I suspect it was a screwdriver bit, a screwdriver with probably a can opener, because I don't have one on here. Got a saw blade, and it's got big knife blade and a small knife blade, and those are both fairly good, workable. Again, the fork and the spoon are just way too cool. And then on the back, some things that I don't even know what to do with them. Obviously an awl for punching holes in things, and that's nice and sharp, and that's workable. A corkscrew, which I've never used, nor would I use for anything that I could think of. But next to it is a needle. Let's see if I can get it open. It's not easy. This is a file. Doesn't work great. It's been bent. A little screwdriver tip on there. And in between here is a needle that actually is not a bad design. If you did some heavy canvas, very sharp canvas or leather work, that might get that done. Again, this is Japanese. I'm sure that's from the 1950s, if not before. I don't know much about it. It's got bone handles, and seems very vintage 1950s. I found this in an antique store, and very similar to a scout knife. It's labeled Ward's. Was the knife maker, and let's see if I can get all these open. One of these is very hard, stiff. That's a can opener. I don't know, it's not a great design for a can opener, it seems to me, but might have worked well. Screwdriver and bottle opener, bottle cap opener, of course. And on this side was an awl that the tip has broken off. But bone handles, I saw that in an antique store for just a few dollars, and I bought it and quickly had to repair it. A piece of the bone broke off here, but a little epoxy, and in fact, it did not break off. It was chipped when I got it. I took that off of another old knife that I had. I just realized that. and it closely matched. You can see there's a slight color difference, but I cut a piece to fit in there just to make this more desirable. Probably ruined the value as an antique, but I don't buy things for antique purposes. This little knife is really fun. My son found this in an abandoned house, and you can see how small it is. I cannot read the markings on it. It's way too small. Little keychain knife, I guess, and I'm guessing that definitely has to date back into the 30s or 40s, and I could be wrong, but that celluloid handle style looks very much from that era. And this vintage knife was my father-in-law's, and he used it as a fishing knife, and you can see that it is not in great shape. It was marked Queen Steel number 75, and you can see these online. People sell them in good condition. I'm guessing just from my father-in-law's work, this dates back to the 1960s, and the fishing that he did with this. I just love the design. It's a hunting knife design, nice and thin. He used it to fillet fish, but he caught really big fish, and I love having that around. When I was growing up, my dad had this in his drawer, and boy, we'd sneak it out into the woods every chance we got. I found that this is probably one of those knives they call the PAL knife, P-A-L, from the World War II era. And when I was a kid, and I would say even to today, this is one of the sweetest hunting knife designs that I ever saw. Aluminum butt cap, and it's kind of loose today. Finger guard, really sweet patina. My dad kept it razor sharp, and that was fascinating to me when I was a kid. And I'd sneak it out into the woods and made sure he didn't know I did that, and use it for things. Of course, it's a nice big style. This is the original sheath. My dad would have been growing up in the 1940s, may have gotten it as a teenager, or put it in correctly. And when I was in college, I found somebody who had one just like it, except beat up pretty good. Somebody had ground the mess out of the steel. I don't know if they were trying to darken it or what, and I don't know where he got it, but it was the exact design. And I traded him. What he wanted was a pocket knife, something that he could keep in his pocket, and he traveled back and forth from college, and so I was very glad to get a hold of this. And so now I've got the matching set, and this one I can use. Even the markings on it had been ground off. I can't tell what the markings were originally. Made a little leather sheath for it, made it so it was either side. And my dad's didn't have any markings on it. There was no telling who made this, but beautiful vintage knife. I enjoyed them very much. The oldest knife that I have, at least that I know is old, I have an idea of its age, is this. It was my great-grandfather's knife. It's an electrician's knife. It opens, it's Boker. It opens very stiffly. You hear that walk and talk? It's a very stiff back spring, and the screwdriver blade that's made for stripping wire is so stiff that I could barely open it. In the old days, these electricians' knives, I think this would be for wire stripping, and I don't know what the dent. This is for screwdriver, but it had the old liner lock, a brass liner lock, and I know that this knife is surely 100 years old or more. My great-grandfather would have been operating in the 19-teens and the 1920s when he was a carpenter and working. And this Boker is his, and now it's mine. Those are my vintage knives, and I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly do. Anybody that likes knives enjoys looking at those.